Today is Tuesday, June the 9th. So welcome. Good to see everybody. Hey there, Carrie. Hi, Kim. How are you guys doing this morning? Oh, somebody's muted. Oh, now you're not muted. So I wanted to kind of open up the floor to start. I've got a couple topics to talk about, but really I want to make sure that this is a time where if people want to ask questions and hash things out, I'd love to do that. So does anybody have any scenarios or questions that they want to throw at the group? Sometimes you're throwing them at me, but sometimes I don't know the answer, so we throw them out to the group to see what best practices are. So anybody have any questions?
No.
No questions. All right. So one of the agents brought to me recently was how are we handling open houses and where do we know to get that information and what are the steps that we follow and stuff like that. And so what I'm going to do is just share with you where I go to get my information. And because Oregon Association of Realtors is constantly, it feels like sometimes weekly, they're updating stuff. I feel like that there might be a gap between when we tell you guys things and when you may have a new listing and you're planning to hold an open house. So the best source for that information really is, and what Lucinda goes and looks at, and Kevin and I as well, is we go to the Oregon Association Realtors. They've got constantly updating. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's go with our everybody see my, oops, that's my calendar, but I want to show you the Oregon Association. So Oregon Association of Realtors, COVID guidelines. You can usually find exactly what you need just by typing out what you're looking for. So this has been the COVID updates page. They usually have the dates here as to what phase 2 or phase 1 or whatever phase we're in. And then I'm basically going down through here sometimes on a every other day basis, sometimes just on a weekly basis, depending on what I've heard most recently in the Monday meetings or if I'm getting asked new information. But it was down here the other day. Oh, it looks like they've even, today's the 9th. Yeah, I haven't been in here since last week actually. But there was a guide on open houses, if I remember correctly. Yeah, there it is. So May 27th, they talked about open houses. And let me move, I'm kind of seeing you guys in here. Actually, I'll move you over here so I can read this information. And so the guidelines are down in here. Open house by appointment only, or where a realtor has marked off 6-foot distances for people to line up outside. Okay, so that's a requirement. So it can be pretty complicated. Wearing of masks is highly, highly encouraged. You can't force people on the outside to do that, but
there's no rules.
All these guidelines are intended for workplaces. They provide best practices, including restricting use of any shared items, ensuring alcohol-based sanitizer is provided, regularly disinfecting commonly touched surfaces, as well as high traffic areas. And so we're in the point to where we cannot stop anyone from holding an open house, but they make it kind of complicated in order to keep people safe and keep people protected, which obviously is both a positive and sometimes can be a negative, because then it's very difficult sometimes to meet all the guidelines. What are your guys' thoughts? What has anybody been holding open houses or doing any of this kind of stuff yet?
I haven't had one, but I had wanted to. And do you have any idea if stage 3 means we go back to normal?
I honestly, I don't know what stage 3 entails. Um, I'm kind of like stay in the moment kind of thing.
I know.
don't
I just
exactly-
I'm just trying to figure out when will these restrictions will loosen up. That's
Right.
all.
And that's what's so hard is like when there was another outbreak that happened in Lincoln, I think it was in Lincoln County, that probably their restrictions will become a little harsher for a period of time. And that's why it really feels like it's week to week,
Right.
the way that we're processing and making.
Well, I'm in Lincoln County, and I told a seller last week, no. I showed her the seller's advisory. I showed her our office document because we hadn't changed it yet, that we still weren't recommending them. And I just said, right now, the best thing to do is the marketing that we have online for you. And I continue marketing out to all the agents. I send emails out to the agents. I just told her to be patient. Let's wait, because your health and my liability is way more important than what you've got going on at your house, unless you're in an emergency fire situation that you have to sell.
Right.
And she was cool. They said, we'll just wait it out. I'm not going to push you to do an open house.
Yeah. And that's a major part of it is you have to be comfortable. I would not, if you feel like that you're not ready to do that, then I would not encourage you to do that either. I mean, we always take risks in everything that we do, but you have to take educated risks. And right now, I'm not sure if I would be ready to hold any open houses.
I can't control other people, and that's what I told her. I said, I can't make those people wear masks. I can't make all these people, use hand sanitizer, but at least people that are coming in your house with a broker, they've been talked to, they understand the necessary precautions that we're taking. But random people just pulling up in front of your house, I don't have control over that, and I just don't want that responsibility. So they trusted me.
Right. So anyway, this is the place to go to get those updates. Literally, Carol Hoyer, who I work closely with a lot, there's our buyer advisory, our seller's advisory, and those have been updated, I think, numerous times at this point. Yeah, this one was updated on the 27th. So it tracks up, and so the most recent updates are obviously at the top, and then you can look further down for the history of what's been happening. Any questions on any of that stuff, guys? Okay. Any comments as to, are you seeing other people holding open houses? Are you, any thoughts on that?
In Eugene, we are.
What's that?
In Eugene, we are.
Okay. And how are those going? And do you feel like that other agents are following all of the guidelines and stuff like that? Or are they kind of like,
Well, let's put it this way. Even when I had strict guidelines about when I wasn't having open houses, I was just allowing realtors to take their clients through. We were way stricter than anybody else.
And I think
so I think I agree with Judy.
Yeah.
We don't have control.
Yep. And having had an open house right before COVID happened, it was really awkward. I mean, I literally felt like I was the police at the front door, and it was, people would come in the door, even though you were like, no, I need you to stand outside. And then there's people down the stairs. And like when you're in the grocery store, people don't keep their 6-foot distance from each other. It's almost impossible to when you're passing through a door.
Right.
So that's part where it creates liability. If someone were to contract something at your open house, or it could be pulled back to that area, then there's potentially some liability there. So, okay. Enough said on that. I'm going to stop share on that. All right. Any other questions anybody wants to talk about? Opening the floor again.
I thought we were going to talk about how to get the yes for the 6% listings. That's why I showed up today.
All right.
Are we going to do that?
Let's get into that. Yep. I have.
Okey-doke.
So I'm going to share. Whoops. Actually, I went over to it, but I need to share my screen. So this is how I have, for probably the last, probably since about 2008, this has been my listing presentation. And it actually starts with, let me go further back up. Here, actually, let me go to the very top. I call it the hassle-free listing. And so part of it is, this is a packet that I send my clients so that it educates them ahead of time. And it also kind of sets a standard. When we walk into a presentation and we have no set kind of standard of practice, the seller, in my opinion, and if somebody were to come to me and not have anything in writing, I would think that they're a lot more negotiable, because when you have something in writing, it's less negotiable. Just psychologically, I think that way, and I think most people would. So, so let me move this smaller so I can see it while I'm presenting it to you guys. So part of what I do with my hassle-free listing packet is a lot of education. I want to make sure that they understand I'm their professional. I am here to educate you. I'm here to take you through the journey of selling your home. Please trust me through this process and understand I am the best out there. And that's kind of the way that you need to come across that. Yeah, you can hire somebody else for 5% or 4% or something like that. There are those discounted brokers out there, and they do a decent job, but a lot of times I out negotiate them, or I am better at my job, because if I can't even negotiate my own commission, how am I going to negotiate on your behalf when you want to stick to your guns and the buyer wants you to come down on price? And so that's part of what I present as well, as I talk about that. You want somebody that's a tough negotiator. And so I put things in writing, and I put in guarantees. And so this is what my packet looks like. So I send this ahead of time, and I ask them when I arrive, have you read through my hassle-free listing presentation? I'd like to hit some highlights, but I want to make sure that you understand everything in there. Or if you haven't, or if I'm showing up with it, I will say, I'm going to leave this with you so that as I hit kind of the highlights, that you have time to look through this and read it in full. And then let me know if you have any questions. And so I talk about why you need a real estate professional, the marketing we do, the security we provide, the negotiations. So I start with providing, hey, we provide tons of value. I'm a top negotiator. I've taken psychological courses on negotiating, and so that is the part that I love to get into with other people. People love to hear that you're like not afraid of negotiating. And then obviously everybody has to do this, whether you're on the buyer side or the seller side. You're going to have to go through monitoring, renegotiating, and then all the way to closing and settling. I believe that my commission is 6% because I offer the buyer's agent anywhere between 2.5%, and in some instances where we're really trying to encourage them, up to 3 or 3.5%. But if I start with a 5% listing and I offer 2.5%, anything above that, I'm cutting my own commission out in order to incentivize the buyer's agent, right? So there's no room for me to, in fact, I make less than the buyer's agent. And to me, I'm like, I know I'm valuable, and I know I'm more valuable than any buyer's agent that's gonna sell your home. So I'm going to negotiate on your behalf. I'm going to provide tons of marketing. I'm going to take you through the whole process, just like the buyer's agent is. And also, there's a lot of things that we pay out in order to provide security for your home with our lockbox system. So those are the things that we provide. Then I talk about how we value their home based on location, price, competition, condition, and what the current market is. I talk about intelligent pricing. If we're priced at market value, then we are probably going to get a lot more buyers to show the home. If you want a cash offer and you want to lower your price 15% below market value, we could probably get you a cash offer today. But if you price it too high, if you're 15%, 10% above market value, then we're going to get a much smaller percentage of buyers. And so my job as your real estate agent is to, again, provide that value of good pricing and also feedback along the way. If we don't get showings, we need to discuss and be ready to quickly lower your price. And so this is all, and as I'm sharing this, this information, I'm asking questions and saying, does that sound fair to you? Does that, and allow them to jump in with their thoughts. And so how does it sound so far? Any questions, or do you want to question anything that I'm doing so far? Okay. I talk about what a CMA is, what a comparative market analysis is. I talk about short sales and foreclosures. We dealt a lot more of those in 2008 to 12. And so I want to make sure that they understand that those do affect market value. But in this market right now, there are not as many on the market. And so they don't affect the market value as much as they've done in the past. But they are out there. And so we need to make sure that we see what those are, what the condition of those properties are, and make sure that we're fair to your property when valuing your property. I talk about intelligent timing, how we want to hit the market with a good price, because usually in the first 3 to 4 weeks is when you get the most market activity. And if we're priced way too high and we get little showings in the first 2 to 3 weeks, then our showings are going to continue to go down. People are going to question as to what is wrong with this property, that it's staying on the market so long. And they may not see that it's dropped in price, or they may question the condition or the location, things like that. And so I talk about how timing is important on the market. And then again, I ask them questions. Does that sound reasonable? Does that sound normal? Have you heard anything differently than that? That way they can then say, yes, you're right on. If they keep saying yes to everything that you're saying, then when you get down to talk to commission and you say, are you ready to talk about commission? Then they're like, well, yeah, we love to talk. We want you to take a 5% listing. And I say, well, I don't take 5% listings. I'm sorry. You can go and find somebody that'll take a 5% listing. But what I do is again, provide more value. Our basic objectives are to get you the most amount of money in the least amount of time with the fewest hassles. Our job is to satisfy the customer, and what makes our hassle-free listing so great is we provide a flexible commission. I'll share with you that in a second. You can cancel the listing at any time. There's no advance fees of any kind. There's no pressure presentation from a buyer's agent or a buyer. And then I provide excellence guarantees. Now, when I say that you can cancel the listing anytime, I also want to make sure that you understand that the contract that we sign also has caveats in there that you couldn't all of a sudden, that I bring in a buyer and then you cancel the listing on that day and then go around me and then go use that buyer. There are parts in the contract that protect me as your agent. So I just want to make sure we're under the understanding that ultimately, yes, you can cancel the listing anytime, but any buyer procured during the time that I listed the property or up to 90 days after, then I would in turn still be owed a commission. Does that sound fair? And I always ask those type of questions. Does that sound fair? They're like, yeah, you know, if you put in a lot of work, we want to make sure that you get paid. Well, but if your plans change, if all of a sudden you lose a job and you're like, I don't want to move now, or now's not the time for us to move, I'm not going to force you to continue to list your property for the next 5 to 6 months. And any contract that I bring in front of you, you're going to reject anyway. So I want you to know you can cancel at any time. The excellence guarantees are to make sure that, I think one of the most important things is people want to make sure their agent communicates with them well. And so we have excellence in communication, marketing, and I've got some excellence guarantees I'm going to go over later. Does that sound okay? Yeah, let's do that. So then I talk about how I save you on money on commissions. I always, and here's how I start, I always list my properties at 6%. I know I'm valuable. I've been in this industry for a long period of time. And here's how I typically work, is I list properties for 6%. And on occasion, I list them for the buyer's agent to receive 2.7%. But if the going rate right now on a listing is 2.5%, we'll put that exact verbiage in the contract. Either way, I'm going to make the additional 3.3 to 3.5%. We handle all the details. There is another buyer's agent involved on the other side that needs to be paid. And we go from start to finish. We cover everything in escrow, and we make sure we keep the buyer's agent highly accountable. But we have an opportunity where we like to save our client's commission. If for some reason, and this is why in the room, I always list my properties with a co-listing agent, and that's Carol Hoyer. And I said, in a case where a buyer calls on the sign, wants to see the property, and we decide either Carol or myself, depending on who's available, if we decide that we can show that client the property and we understand that they are not represented, then we want to save you money, because that's an opportunity where we're going to earn both sides of the commissions, but we need to make sure that we still keep both clients' best interests in mind. And so that's the rare occasion, and it does happen pretty rarely, that the buyer reaches out to us rather than being represented. And that's where we like to save our clients a full 1%, and we'll lower our commission to 5.0%. Otherwise, if it's sold through the MLS with another buyer's agent, we always go for 6%. And, but in the 5% case, we find the buyer, oh, sorry, keep clicking on the wrong stuff. We find the buyer, we write the contract, there's no other agent involved, our commission is 5%, and we're completing both sides. Now what happens in that instance is now, even though Carol and I have co-listed this property, she becomes the buyer's agent completely. She's still on the listing contract because she has some knowledge, and we've had conversations previous to that. But from that point forward, she becomes the buyer's agent, works in their best interest, and I work with you as the listing agent and work only in your best interest. And that way we keep both parties satisfied, and we keep their interests in mind when we talk candidly or in private. We're not revealing, Carol and I are not having conversations about what you and I talk about as the seller and listing agent. Now, again, there's another rare case that we will lower our commission to 4% if I don't have to do any marketing, if I don't have to do any time on the market, then, and you find the buyer, if you have a cousin or a friend or somebody that wants to buy your property, and we don't really have to negotiate out on price, we can settle on that fairly quickly, then we will list and sell your property for 4%. And then I ask the question, do you have anybody in mind that is ready to sell, or that you're ready to sell that property to? And at that point, if they do, well, we do have a neighbor that's talked about, well, let's write that person's name down, because I want to record that in this instance, if we sell the property to this person, that we will sell it for 4%. And so we'll write down a name or two if they have anybody in mind. But most times people they have no idea who's going to buy their home. And so that basically takes that. If they can't name anybody at the listing before we sign the contract, then that 4% opportunity basically goes away. Okay. So questions on that? Any questions or combat me on this, or let me know if there's something you think, well, I don't think this would work, or what do you guys think?
I don't have a team, so the 5% wouldn't work. Is that how that works?
Well, you could call up another agent. Judy, I think you've worked on this. Have you had any listings that you've worked on both sides? Oh, you're muted right now.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yep.
Okay, so I did a lot transaction where I was able to represent both sides. It feels a little bit uncomfortable because they do try to get an edge and try and get you to share the other person's side, but you just don't. So I did get on that one, and then I have a house right now that's under contract, and it became a little bit uncomfortable with the seller, and so Lucinda's helping me out with that. So I think I found that I don't really want to do both sides, at least not this stage as a new person.
Right.
And so I did talk to somebody in the office to find out if they would want to step in those kinds of situations. So I do have another agent that's willing to do that with me. I think I'm going to go that direction, like Trevor's done.
Yeah.
Okay.
But not be like a partner. It'll be like a listing per listing thing.
I had one that really went south, and I don't ever want to do it again. That was double-sided. So
yeah,
I
don't know why people agree to it in the beginning and then become snotty about it. I don't get that. Well, because I'm pretty clear.
It's really hard to represent two different parties' best interests when you're the person in the middle. They make assumptions that we aren't looking out for their best interests, because it's really difficult to hold two people's interests at the highest regard. There's always the thought that you're representing the other party a little bit more than you are us.
Yeah, and that's what happened with these sellers. They
Kim, what about
felt
you?
like,
I
oh
do it
shoot.
all the time.
Yeah, they
You do it
felt
all
like
the
I
time?
betrayed them, and it blows me away.
So how do you do it, Kim?
In a small town where I've been here for many years, I just do it all the time. Especially in the beginning,
Mhm.
in the early 2000s.
Uh-huh.
It was 50% of my deals were representing
Wow.
both parties. Lately, when there's a lot of agents, not so much. But you just have to be upfront and honest. And I've only once had someone say they didn't want me representing both sides, and then they ended up wanting me to represent them. So I did.
So you've definitely built up a reputation around there that she's able to do both sides. She's able to represent everybody's interest. And I think that's kind of the appeal of working in a small town, right? I mean,
Yeah,
your
yeah, and the
reputation is
communication.
everything, right?
Yeah, you just have to have really good communication with everybody and just be upfront
Yeah.
with everybody.
Yeah. And not that in other towns that our reputation isn't as important. It's just there's so many agents out there and there's so many choices that that maybe they're not going to see you again. And so that's, I mean, yeah, you've been there for a long time. So I personally, because I've always worked in Hillsborough and some of these larger cities, it rarely has happened to me. And first off, and then when it has, I just felt like I know that I can't negotiate that way. I would lean too much to the person that I sold the property or that's listing the property with me, because that was the first person that came to me.
That's hard.
It is. It's got to be hard. So
if you were to pick somebody from the office, would you still just give them the 2% since you're going to be doing all the marketing?
everything in real estate is negotiable. That's what I would say. So if you want to do a referral fee and say, hey, I'm referring you this buyer, I would like, 20, 25% of this from the buyer side, but I am not representing that party at all. I do have a financial interest in it, but I am representing the seller wholly. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you may be able to find buyers or buyer's agents. But again, that's depends on who you get on the other side.
Okay.
Part of me would be like, I don't know if I would want to hand off a buyer to an agent that doesn't have a lot of experience on working with a property listed in the same office, just because, again, even though it's even though we are representing each party, we're now still affiliated with the same office. And so I feel like that people are mostly distrusting. And so I would just want to protect myself by saying, okay, I'm going to hand you off to an agent that is fairly experienced or is a good negotiator. I just wouldn't want that buyer to feel shorted and being like, yeah, you gave me somebody that's only done 2 deals.
Yeah.
Yeah, now you're going to out negotiate them, and now I'm doubly screwed because you referred them to somebody else. So I make sure that they're comfortable with whoever. I make the introduction and I say, hey, if you feel like that this person wouldn't work, then please let me know and we can try to put you in connection with another agent. So there's got to be some accountability there as well. Thoughts or questions? Does this seem like it would work for you guys? What is the appeal of using this?
Hope.
What's that?
Hope for a better commission.
Okay. Do you currently have anything written down that that kind of explains how you work like this? Or do you just do it all verbally?
Me, I do it verbally.
You do it verbally. Okay.
They get when you start to flip through the book and reading the things, they lose interest and they're not paying attention. Mm-hmm. They want all the information right then and there. So I stopped doing that.
That's why, I mean, that's why I've made this. There is a lot of information in here, but it's kind of like little teeny sections, and I bold out a lot of stuff so that it's like, here's the point I'm trying to make on this page, but here's the details. When I go on, basically I talk about why are you paying 6%, how the commission is distributed between a listing broker, a listing agent, the selling broker, and the selling agent, that there's not just one party involved. There's actually 4 parties involved with that commission split. And so it is split out 4 different ways between the brokerage and the agent that's with the brokerage. And so they understand, oh, you're not getting 100% of 6%.
Yeah.
That's okay. That makes sense that there's other people that get paid. And so, so that helps to educate people on that side where they don't know where the commission goes. We have to educate them about that process.
When
And
they
then I
think
also
you're getting 30,000,
What's that?
when they think you're getting 30,000, they really expect a lot.
Yeah, yeah. But when they realize, oh, you only get 15,000, but oh, you don't get 15,000, you get 75% of 15,000 or whatnot. Then they're like, oh, okay, this the piece, your piece of the pie keeps getting smaller, and so. And also you talk about, you know, as I take on every single client that I take on, there is liability there as well. There's risk that I'm taking each time I do a transaction. So when I do decide to represent the buyer within our brokerage and they come unrepresented, there's not a relationship there. And so there's a little bit more risk in doing that. And so that's why we're paid more as well. We have E&O insurance. I talk about all of our expenses too. It's not like I just throw a sign in the yard that costs me $30. I print off a bunch of flyers that are another $30, and then I make 99.5%. I talk about what does it take to be a part of the MLS? What are the costs there? I don't spell it all out, but I do help them to understand there's costs involved with marketing. There's costs involved with taking you out then to purchase your next home. There's costs involved. So all of these other costs are all my expense.
Reading these forms helps you memorize them so that you can do it verbally. Those are really good to have sitting there. And it also just brings back memories of what you should say during a listing appointment.
Yeah. And I think because people, every person that you come across, they learn differently. Some people, when you try to verbalize everything to them, they lose 90% of it. And so when you slide a paper in front of them, they're able to then also read along with, okay, my property sells through the MLS 6%. We find the buyer 5%. Okay, makes more sense. And so as you kind of take them through it, they're able to learn how they learn. And then again, you're building more trust. The more trust you can build with people, the stronger the relationship is, and the more likely they are to say yes. The last thing that I do, which I've never ever had to pay out of, was I talk about our listing cancellation policy. And I said that earlier, as you remember up here. I talk about our excellence guarantees right here. I'll talk about those later. And so then once we talk about commission, how it's distributed, I talk about my listing cancellation policy. And I say, you want to make sure that I am going to do a good job. You want to make sure that I'm going to represent your interests before my own. And you want to make sure that I'm going to communicate with me. Is there anything else you want to make sure that I do? And then I give them the opportunity, well, we had a bad experience where an agent did this, and we want to make sure that you don't do that. Okay, fair enough. I can promise you I'm not going to do that. And if you decide to, I still have Source Realty in here. Ding, ding. When you list your home with any agent, you can cancel your contract with us at any time. Simply call us. Give us 24 hours to get the MLS system out and everything out of your house within 72 hours. And then lastly, I talk about what is our communication guarantee, that if there's ever a week that you don't hear from me with an update on the marketing of your property, I'll give you $100 discount at closing, and we'll give you $100 for each time it happens. And so that holds my feet to the fire to just communicate weekly. It's not that hard to send a text, shoot them an email and say, hey, I wish I had an update for you, but there is nothing happening with your property. And that's really why it's important. And that's by communicating regularly, even by having this policy, it helps me to communicate regularly with them so that when I do get to week 3, I can say, remember week 1, we only had 1 showing. Week 2, we had 2 showings, and I had that broker open where everybody said we needed to lower the property. Now it's week 3 and we're having no showings. I really want to recommend we lower this price now before we get further into the market, into our listing time. And so when I do that, it again helps me with my communication policy, but it also helps me to get them to trust me that I'm following through on everything I said. I'm communicating on time, and I'm communicating what's going on with their listing. And that, other than talking about first impressions, that's the last part of my listing presentations, a showing checklist, what they should do to get their house ready to show, and then a moving checklist, basically what they need to do to move from this home to another. So those are the last 3 pages.
Are you sharing this with us?
I can. You guys want me to do this with you? Let me do this. I'll put it in the chat. And you can, I believe you can, let's try this. I put other stuff in the chat before, and I believe you can download it.
Can I ask a question while you're doing that?
Yeah, please.
Paragon, RMLS mentioned something about Paragon. Does that mean Willamette Valley is joining RMLS? Did you see that?
I don't know. I need to look into this with Paragon.
It's on the desktop of RMLS.
Okay.
I think. Or maybe it was in an email. It could be in an email.
What does Paragon do? Remind me of that.
Paragon is the MLS that Willamette Valley uses, I think.
Okay. Is it the system that they're using to enhance their videos and their pictures and their
No,
that kind
I think
of
it's
stuff?
just the company.
Oh, okay. Huh.
Like when you click on one of their listings, it's from Paragon.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Maybe it's
So being right there in the middle of Dallas, Salem, and RMLS, so a lot of times people around this area list with both.
right.
So it's a good listing tool
Yep.
to have both.
Because you're in both WVMLS and RMLS, right?
The area is, I'm not. I'm only in RMLS.
Oh, okay. Let me get this in here.
Battery's dying.
I did this last week. There's a way to attach here. Maybe it's up here. No.
Trevor, since there's just 3 of us, can't you just send it to our emails?
Yeah, I could do that. Yep.
Thank you.
Carrie, Kim, and Judy. Yep, I will do that. All right. Anybody else have any other questions that we want to chat about or anything going on?
Nope.
Okay. Well, I'm going to stay on here for the next 20 minutes. So if anybody else pops on, you're welcome to hang out too while I get some work done. And actually what I'll do is I'll open up my email and send you the listing presentation.
Do you ever give discounts for FSBOs on your commission?
Of course. I mean, anytime somebody really holds your feet to the fire, there are times where you make a discount. I tend to say, okay, are you going to purchase your next home with me? If that's the case, then yes, I'll discount you by 0.5% or something like that. But yeah, you do what you need to do to win the person over. but I would say probably at least 50%, more like 60% of the time, I'm taking 6% listings. Even my own family, I made them list with me for 6%, and they're like, "Yeah, we trust you. You know, you're worth this." And part of it though too is I co-list with Carol, and I don't want to rip off Carol by discounting my commission as well. So I always upsell by saying you do get 2 agents for the price of 1. And again, the way that I negotiate with another agent in my office to help me cover those things, and the deal that we have worked out between us, is dependent on what business we're working on. Right now, she and I have an open agreement that anything that she lists on, I'm really not going to do hardly any work on, but I will, bail her out, or I will cover her while she's on vacation. And I will go with her on the listing presentation to make sure that we get the listing, show my face at the very beginning. But I only get 20% of her listings. But on the flip side, I'm managing offices and taking care of agents all day. And so when it comes to my listings, I expect her to do a lot of the work behind the scenes. I expect her to be at the listing appointment. I expect her to, if I call on her and need something to be signed or follow up with the clients, and I just can't do it that day, then she's going to take care of it. And she takes 50% of my listings. And so I provide the value in that we get the listing, but then she provides the value in taking care of the details. On the flip side, she provides the value of the listing that she provides, but I provide no value in helping her cover except for when she's on vacation. So that's why I only get 20% of hers. But it's just a deal that we worked out between us to where that we found over the years has worked. And every year, I mean, as our careers have moved to different places, when I was just a listing agent, I would give her a lot less of my listing commission because I was working directly on those listings. So every partnership is different and depends on where you're at. As long as you're communicating and saying, let's talk about this again next year at this time and see where we're at, see how we both felt about it. As long as that communication is open, because I've had partnerships that have failed and have not gone well, and that was usually because I was doing 82% of the business and splitting it 50-50, and I was just like, this ain't working.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't have a partner, but I am playing with FizBiz a little bit. So, and they usually lots of times will let me in the door for 2.5% given to the buyers, but then I have to do some wheeling and dealing if I can get to be the seller's agent, or the listing agent.
I had another agent that I was talking to last week that he said that when it comes to lower, like if they get little or no showings, what he says is let's not lower the price, let's increase the buyer's agent commission. So instead of signing a 6% listing, let's now sign a 7% listing, and we'll offer the buyer's agent 3.5%. And let's see how many buyer's agents want to show your property. And so he goes a different route. And again, it depends on how you're incentivizing people. People are motivated by money, or they're motivated by price. And so that's a different route. But then when he goes from a 6% listing to a 7% listing, then he has even more flexibility when it comes to lowering the price and then also lowering his commission. So.
With the inventory so low, have you seen any agents not look at 2.5%?
We are required, our MLS says that we are not to show any property. Even if you see a property in there that's only offering $500 buyer's agent commission, you are required to show that property because you're doing what's in the best interest of your clients, not yourself. Now, is there probably agents that would say, $500 buyer's agent commission, I am not showing that property. They can choose to do that, but that is according to our MLS and the agreement that we have all signed to be a part of that MLS. We are then going against what our word is. Right. So that's a personal choice that I don't think, that's again, another reason why a buyer agency agreement is so important, because if a buyer's agent's BAC is only $500, then you've signed an agreement with, hey, my clients still owe me 2.5%.
Uh-huh.
3% or whatever your
Right.
contract says. And so you show them that property and you say, hey, unfortunately on this one, the buyer agency agreement is that they are only going to offer me $500 to sell this property. But as you and I agreed in the beginning, before we ever started showing properties, you wanted to value what I was offering, and I provided a valuable service. I have taken you out. I've spent a lot of money. We went to dinner. I'm going to continue to negotiate and renegotiate. But unfortunately, on this property, when I show it to you, I want to make sure you understand that you're going to have to make up the difference on top of the price. So usually, if the BAC is much lower, hopefully you're seeing that the price is also very low as well. That is incentivizing a lot of people to show that. That's again why, and that's again why too, that I honestly don't feel like I have to negotiate with for sale by owners when it comes to what they're offering. Great, you're offering 2%. I'd love to show your property, no problem, because I know that my clients are going to make up the other 0.5% in order to pay my commission.
Uh-huh.
And that was a discussion that we had in the very beginning before I started showing them properties, that I provide a valuable service. I know that I'm worth 2.5%. And so let's go out and let's work together and do this. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So your buyers is 2.5%.
Almost always.
Guaranteed.
Sometimes I'll sign a 3% one if it's, but yeah, it's almost always 2.5 because that's kind of the going rate out there. And I want my clients to not have to pay an additional commission.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. That's good.
Yeah.
I think I'm done.
All right. Well, I think
And
I'm
I
done
can't
too.
think of any more questions.
What's that? I've got a client that is, or an agent that's just